In the summer of 2012, my wife Angelina and I, both in our early 30s, and stressed from our jobs, she a teacher, I in sales, sought an escape from city life. We found an inexpensive cabin rental online, nestled in the woods near Lake George in upstate New York, perfect for a 2-week getaway. The cabin was modest, a small wooden structure featuring a kitchen, living room, bedroom, and a tiny bathroom, eschewing modern distractions like a TV or Wi-Fi. It offered only nature and tranquility. Our plan was to hike, fish, and simply relax. In early July, we loaded our car with groceries, books, and hiking gear before driving up. The cabin itself was situated at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by dense pine trees, providing a sense of pleasant isolation. About 100 yards away, partially obscured by brush, stood another cabin. This one was markedly older and dilapidated, with peeling paint, dirty windows, and an undeniable abandoned feel, as if vacant for years. Initially, we paid it little mind, assuming it might just be an old storage shed. On our second day, I was outside chopping some firewood we found stacked by the shed, when I saw a guy come out of that rundown cabin. He was in his late 50s, maybe with gray hair, a scruffy beard, and wearing faded jeans and a flannel shirt. He waved at me, so I waved back and walked over to say hi. His name was Jonathan. He said he had a calm voice, kind of soft-spoken. He told me he lived there year-round, fixing up the place in his spare time. It didn't look fixed up at all, but I didn't question it. We chatted for a bit about the weather, how hot it was that summer, and he mentioned some good fishing spots on the lake. Angelina came out and joined us, and we all laughed about city folks like us trying to rough it in the woods. They seemed normal enough, just a quiet guy living off the grid. After that, I started seeing him every day around 4 p.m. It became this routine. I'd be sitting on our porch with a cup of tea, and he'd wander over, or I'd walk to his place if he didn't show.
We talk about random stuff one day. It was about the best trails for hiking. He recommended a loop around the lake that took about 2 hours. Another time we discussed cars. He said he had an old Ford truck that broke down a lot. He asked about our lives in the city, and I told him about my job, how Angelina loved teaching kids.
He shared stories about growing up in the area, hunting deer in the fall, that kind of thing. Nothing deep or weird, just neighborly talk. Angelina thought he was a bit odd living in that dumpy cabin alone, but she didn't mind. She even baked some cookies and gave him a plate one afternoon. This went on for about 5 days. It felt like we were settling into a peaceful vacation rhythm. Mornings we'd make coffee and eggs, afternoons we'd read or nap, and evenings we'd grill burgers and watch the sunset. I started looking forward to those 4 p.m. chats. It broke up the day. Then on the 6th day, I decided to go on a solo hike. Angelina, feeling tired from our walk, opted to stay behind and rest. I grabbed my backpack, water bottle, and a trail map, heading out for a hike around noon. The hike itself was enjoyable, leading up a hill with views of the lake peeking through the dense forest. I even spotted a deer and captured several photos on my phone. However, the hike took longer than anticipated, and I didn't return until approximately 3:30 p.m. As I neared our cabin, a sense of unease washed over me. The front door was wide open, gently swaying in the breeze. I called out for Angelina, but received no reply. My heart began to race. While I initially thought she might have left it open by accident, it was uncharacteristic of her. Stepping inside, I found the cabin in disarray. Chairs were overturned, kitchen drawers were pulled out, and our belongings were scattered across the floor as if someone had ransacked the place. "Angelina," I yelled, rushing through the rooms. The living room was trashed. Couch cushions flipped. The bedroom door was shut. But there was no sign of her, and panic hit me hard. I checked the bathroom empty. I grabbed my phone to call her, but there was no signal out there, just like always. We had to drive a mile down the road for bars. I thought maybe she went for help or something, but why the mess? Then I remembered Jonathan. Maybe he saw something. I bolted out and ran to his cabin. The door was shut, windows dark. As usual, I knocked hard, yelling, "Jonathan, you there? Something happened at our place." No answer. I knocked again, louder, but nothing. I tried the doorknob. It was locked. Peering through a grimy window, the inside looked empty, just shadows and old furniture, no sign of him. Frustrated and scared, I turned back to our cabin. As I walked in, I heard a noise from the bedroom, a soft creak. "Angelina." I called the door open slowly, and there she was, peeking out her face, pale and eyes wide with fear. She rushed to me, hugging me tight, shaking. "Oh God, you're back," she said. I held her, asking what happened. She pulled me into the bedroom and shut the door like she was still afraid. She told me everything, her voice trembling. She'd been napping on the bed around 1 p.m. The cabin quiet, except for birds outside. Then she heard a loud crash, the front door being forced open. She jumped up, heart racing, and cracked the bedroom door to look. There in the living room was Jonathan. He was holding a big kitchen knife in one hand, the kind for cutting meat. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there looking around with this blank expression. Angelina froze for a second, then slammed the bedroom door and locked it. She backed away, grabbed a lamp as a weapon, and hid under the bed, trying not to breathe loudly. He came to the door and knocked soft at first, then harder, banging with his fist. "Angelina." He called, his voice calm, like during our chats. "You in there?" She didn't answer, just stayed hidden, praying he'd go away. The knocking stopped after a minute, but she heard him moving around the cabin, opening drawers, flipping things over. It sounded like he was searching for something. She waited another half hour, too scared to come out, until she heard me calling. I was stunned. Why would Jonathan do that? Break in with a knife? What was he looking for? Or was it worse? Did he want to hurt her? His intention wasn't clear, but it terrified us. We wasted no time. I immediately called 911 and explained the situation. The police assured us officers would be dispatched. About an hour later, 2 officers, a man and a woman from the local sheriff's department, arrived. We recounted the entire story, the online chats, the break-in, and Amina witnessing Jonathan with a knife. They took notes, inspected the cabin, and dusted for fingerprints on the forced door. Next, they inquired about the neighboring cabin. We pointed it out, and they investigated. They returned, stating it was empty. The door was now unlocked, but no one was inside. Only dust, old food cans, and some clothes, suggesting recent squatting. They radioed in to check on the property status. This is when things took a genuinely unsettling turn. The officers contacted Mr. Harlan, the owner of our rental cabin, who lived in town and managed several properties. He soon arrived in a truck, a burly older man. We asked him about the dilapidated cabin next door. Mr. Harlan frowned, confirming that no one was authorized to live there. It had been vacant for years. The real owner, a man named Jonathan Ellis, had gone missing 5 years ago. Back in 2007, he'd lived there alone after his wife died. Then one day he just vanished. Nobody found no clues. The place was tied up in legal stuff, so it sat empty, Miss Carlin said he'd driven by it plenty of times. Never saw anyone around. I felt a chill down my spine. Jonathan, that's the name the guy gave us. I said. The cops exchanged looks. They asked for a description, and it matched what little they knew about the missing owner from old reports. Gray hair, beard, about that age. But if it was him, where had he been for 5 years? And why come back now squatting in his own abandoned place? The police searched the area with dogs that night, but found nothing. No footprints leading away. No sign of him. They figured he might have been some drifter using the name, or maybe it really was the missing guy gone feral or something. They couldn't say. We didn't stick around. We packed our stuff and drove home that night, staying in a motel on the way. The cops called a week later. No leads, case opened, but called. They suggested it could have been a burglary gone wrong. But that knife, it didn't add up. Years later, I still think about it. Was it the real Jonathan back from wherever he disappeared to with some twisted reason for breaking in? Or someone pretending to be him? It's like he was a ghost from the past, chatting with me every day at 4 a.m. p.m., building trust, waiting for his moment. Whatever his intention was, it haunts me that we never found out. During my first summer away at college, I decided against returning home to my mundane retail job, craving adventure instead. My roommate, Chloe, and I secured summer waitressing positions in a beautiful resort town a few hours up the coast. It was a picturesque place, complete with charming shops, a lively boardwalk, and miles of sandy beaches, the kind you see on postcards. We rented a tiny, overpriced apartment, feeling like we were finally experiencing true adult independence. About a month into our stay, I met Leo, a cook at the neighboring restaurant. He was the quintessential beach town local, tan, easygoing, and possessing a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He seemed to know everyone and exuded the confident, relaxed vibe of a true local. He began stopping by my work during his breaks for chats. He was charming and funny, and I'll admit, I developed a bit of a crush. One afternoon, leaning against the counter, he said, "You guys are always working. You need to see the real side of this town, not just the tourist traps." He invited me and Chloe to a locals-only bonfire he and his friends were having that night. He described a secluded cove hidden away from the main beach where you could see all the stars without the boardwalk lights messing up. The view, it sounded perfect and escaped from the crowds of tourists we dealt with all day. We eagerly agreed when we got off our shifts. That evening, we changed and grabbed a 6-pack of soft drinks, feeling excited for a genuine local experience. Leo's directions led us down a winding dirt road that ended near a small unmarked path, cutting through the dunes. It was already getting dark, and the only light was from our phones. The sound of the waves was muffled by the tall grass, making everything feel isolated and strangely quiet. When we finally pushed through the last of the dunes onto the sand, I felt my first twinge of unease. I had pictured a big group of people, music playing, a classic beach party. Instead, there was just a small fire pit with 3 figures sitting around it. It was Leo and 2 other guys. They were much older than him, maybe in their late 30s or early 40s, with weathered faces and a hard look in their eyes. They didn't say a word when we approached, just watched us with flat, emotionless stares. "Hey, you made it," Leo said, his usual bright smile looking a little out of place in the flickering firelight.
"Guys, this is Sarah and Chloe." The 2 men just gave a slight nod, their silence swallowing the sound of the crackling fire. The vibe was immediately off. It wasn't a party. It felt more like we had stumbled into a private, serious meeting. We sat down trying to make conversation, but it was like talking to a brick wall.
Chloe and I did most of the talking. our cheerful chatter sounding loud and foolish in the heavy silence. The older guys never spoke. They just watched us. Then, Leo pulled out a large clear glass bottle with no label. It was filled with a pale gold liquid. "You gotta try some of this," he said, holding it out. "It's a special blend. Best tequila you'll ever have." "Oh, no thanks," I said, holding up my drink. "We're good with these. Come on, just one shot." He insisted, his charming smile becoming a little too fixed. "It's what the locals drink." One of the older guys grunted in agreement. His eyes locked on us. There was something in his gaze that made the hair on my arms stand up. It felt predatory. We politely refused again, and an awkward tension settled over the group. They kept drinking from their bottle, passing it between the three of them, but they never stopped watching us. After about 20 minutes of this strange silence, Chloe suddenly clutched her stomach. "I'm really not feeling well," she said, her voice sounding genuinely pained. "I think it might have been something I ate at work." "Sarah, can we go?" I jumped at the excuse. "Yeah, of course. We should probably get you home." Leah's smile finally dropped. "Already the party's just getting started." "Sorry," I said, not feeling sorry at all. We stood up and started heading back toward the path, our hearts pounding. We didn't say goodbye to the other two men. We didn't even look at them. The path through the dunes was pitch black. Now we walked as fast as we could without running the sand, grabbing at our feet. About halfway to the car, a twig snapped loudly behind us. We both froze. Then we heard the distinct sound of footsteps in the sand. More than one person. They were following us. We didn't even have to look at each other. We just broke into a dead sprint, adrenaline surging through us. We burst out of the dunes and scrambled for my old beat-up car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. The footsteps were getting closer faster. I finally got the door open, and we threw ourselves inside, slamming the doors and hitting the locks just as the three of them emerged from the path. They didn't yell, they didn't bang on the windows or try the handles. They just stopped and stood in a line, perfectly illuminated by my car's headlights. The two older men stared, their faces blank and terrifying, and Leo, the charming local guy, slowly lifted his hand. He gave a small, deliberate wave, and a smile spread across his face. It was the same smile he always used, but without the warmth. It was pure ice, a cold, dead thing. We sped out of there, leaving them standing in the dirt lot. It wasn't until a week later, when we were talking to a police officer about an unrelated issue in our neighborhood, that we learned the truth. We casually mentioned our weird bonfire experience, and the officer's expression darkened. He told us to be careful, that over the past 5 or 6 years, several tourist girls our age had been reported missing from that town. They were never found. I have camped out many times in my life. Some of those trips were for fun, some for work, and others for training. I know the outdoors well, and I've always respected it. Most of the time, nothing bad happens if you're careful and use common sense. But one night, last summer in Northern California, in the mountains, I had an experience that could have turned very bad. I wasn't alone. I had my young son with me. That's what made it so much more serious. We had set up our small tent in a clearing, not far from the tree line. It was fall, and the nights got cold, but the air was fresh and the sky was clear. The moon that night was bright, almost like a giant light bulb hanging above us. We had eaten earlier in the evening. Nothing fancy, just some packaged meals and snacks. I made sure not to leave food lying around because I knew how careless campers attract trouble. Sometime around 1 or 2 in the morning, I woke up. At first I thought it was just normal forest noise, but then I realized it was heavier than that. The sound wasn't a squirrel or a raccoon. It was something big, moving slowly. I sat up in my sleeping bag and listened carefully. The noise came again, a steady crunch of leaves and branches underweight. I slowly unzipped the tent flap, just enough to look outside my eyes, adjusted to the moonlight, and that's when I saw it. About 50 or 60 feet away, just beyond our campsite, stood a large, it was huge, its body broad and heavy, its head swinging slowly as it sniffed the ground. The moonlight made its outline clear. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. The first thing I did was reach for my gun, which I always keep nearby on camping trips. I held it firmly, not because I wanted to shoot the bear, but because I knew I had to be ready. I also knew most bears don't attack unless they feel threatened or smell food. We had no food out, nothing that would attract it, but still the danger was real. While I kept my eyes locked on the bear, I felt movement next to me. My son was waking up. He rubbed his eyes and whispered, asking what was going on. I put a finger to my lips and motioned for him to stay quiet. I slowly pointed outside the tent. He leaned over, looked out, and froze. When he saw the bear, I could see fear in his face, but to his credit, he stayed calm and didn't make a sound. I said softly, telling him to lie still and not move. The bear sniffed the ground, stepped a little closer, then stopped. I didn't want it coming toward the tent. I knew I had to do something without making it worse. Slowly, I raised my gun, aimed at the sky, and fired one warning shot. The sound exploded in the quiet night and echoed off the mountains. The bear flinched but didn't run. My heart dropped, realizing one shot wasn't enough. I studied my breathing, aimed again, and fired a second shot into the air. This time, the bear reacted. It turned sharply, swung its head, and then bolted back into the trees. I watched it move until the darkness enveloped it. The sound of its heavy steps faded, leaving the forest quiet again. As my son let out a breath he had been holding, I whispered that it was okay that the bear was gone, but I knew I couldn't just fall back asleep. After that, I got him to settle down and close his eyes again. But I stayed awake for the rest of the night, sitting up with the gun across my lap, listening to every sound. The forest can be beautiful, but it can also remind you how small you really are. I kept replaying what might have happened if we hadn't been careful, if we had left food outside, or if I hadn't had a way to scare the bear off. Many campers make bad choices. They want to take pictures, yell to scare the animals, or leave food out as if it's no big deal. That's how accidents happen. Most animals won't bother you if you don't bother them, unless something is wrong or they feel threatened. That night taught me something important. Being prepared is not optional when you're in the wild, especially with a child depending on you. My son may not remember all the details now, but I do. I remember the sound of the bear steps, the weight of the gun in my hands, and the look on his face when he saw what was outside. When the morning finally came, the sunlight felt like the safest thing in the world. We packed up our things and moved on, both of us a little more aware of how quickly a calm camping trip can turn into something dangerous. Even though nothing terrible happened, the memory has stayed with me. It wasn't the scariest story anyone could tell, but for me, it was real, and it reminded me how thin the line is between safe and unsafe in the wild.